They say Marines never leave their own behind. It's sacred, it's doctrine, it's who we are. But in November 1950, at the Chosin Reservoir in North Korea, I broke that sacred rule. I left 6 Marines behind in a frozen truck with the Chinese army closing in. I was the lieutenant, 29 years old. The decision was mine, and I chose to save 22 by abandoning 6. My name is Robert Carson, Rob to anyone who knew me before Korea, and for 75 years I've carried the weight of that choice, the faces of those 6 men, the sound of their voices as we walked away, the knowledge that I sentenced them to freeze or be captured because the mathematics of survival demanded it. This is the story of the Chosin Reservoir, of the coldest winter any of us had ever known, of impossible choices made in temperatures 40 below zero, of what it means to command when there are no good options, only terrible ones, and of how sometimes doing the right thing feels exactly like doing the worst thing you've ever done.
Let me take you back to where it started. Not to Korea, but to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1945. I was 24 years old, working in the steel mills like my father and his father before him. 12-hour shifts in heat so intense you couldn't breathe, pouring molten steel, building America. It was honest work, hard work, the kind of work that breaks your body by 50 and buries you by 60. My father had lasted until 58. Heart gave out right there on the factory floor. Died with his boots on, they said, like it was something to be proud of. I didn't want that life. Didn't want to die in that mill. So when the recruiter came through town in 1946 talking about the Marines, about seeing the world, about being more than just another factory worker, I listened, enlisted that same week. My mother cried, said I was making a mistake, that the war was over and there was no reason to go anymore. But I wasn't going to fight. I was going to be something more than what Pittsburgh had waiting for me. The Marines made me an officer, sent me to Quantico for training, taught me tactics, leadership, how to read maps and give orders. By 1948, I was a second lieutenant. By 1950, I was a first lieutenant commanding a platoon. 32 Marines who called me sir and trusted me to keep them alive. I took that responsibility seriously, studied every manual, practiced every drill, made sure my men were the best trained, best equipped platoon in the battalion. I was going to be the kind of officer my men could trust, the kind who never made mistakes, the kind who brought everyone home. Then Korea happened, and I learned that all the training in the world doesn't prepare you for real war. Doesn't prepare you for choices that have no right answer.
June 25th, 1950. North Korea invaded South Korea, crossed the 38th parallel with tanks and artillery and 90,000 troops, rolled through the South Korean defenses like they weren't even there. The United Nations responded, called it a police action, not a war, just a police action. We were going to push the North Koreans back across the border, restore order, be home by Christmas. My platoon shipped out in August, landed at Pusan, pushed north with the rest of the Marines. By October, we'd driven the North Koreans almost all the way back to China, had them on the run. Victory was close, so close we could taste it. General MacArthur said the boys would be home by Christmas. said the war was won, said one more push and it would all be over. He was wrong. November 1st, 1950. The Chinese entered the war, not with a few thousand troops, with 300,000 soldiers, poured across the Yalu River like a human wave, hit our positions with everything they had. We weren't fighting North Korea anymore. We were fighting China. And suddenly, we weren't winning. We were surrounded. My platoon was part of the 1st Marine Division, positioned around the Chosin Reservoir, a frozen lake in the mountains of North Korea. Strategic position, important supply route. We were supposed to hold it while the army advanced further north. But when the Chinese attacked, everything changed. We weren't holding anything. We were trying to survive.
November 27th, 1950. The temperature dropped to 40 below zero. 40 below. Cold so intense that weapons froze. Oil in the engines turned to sludge. Water in canteens became solid ice. Men's breath froze on their faces, creating masks of ice around their mouths and noses. And that's when the Chinese attacked. Not in the daytime, at night. Tens of thousands of them, blowing bugles and whistles, screaming, coming in waves. Human wave attacks. One wave would die, and another would come right behind them, stepping over their own fallen. We fought them off, barely. Used every bullet, every grenade, held our positions through that first night. But by morning, we understood. We were surrounded, completely cut off. 120,000 Chinese troops between us and safety. The order came down from division. Fighting withdrawal. We weren't retreating, they said. We were attacking in a different direction. 78 miles south to the port of Hungnam. 78 miles through enemy territory in the worst winter conditions any of us had ever seen. My platoon started that march with 32 men. 32 Marines I'd trained with, led for 2 years, knew by name, by face, by story. I knew that Corporal Wu was engaged to a girl in San Francisco, that Private Santos had a baby daughter he'd never met, that Private Lee was the youngest, only 19, lied about his age to enlist. I knew all of them, and I'd promised myself I'd bring them all home.
The first 2 days of the march were hell. We moved during daylight hours when we could see the Chinese positions, fought through ambushes, lost men to sniper fire, lost more to the cold. Frostbite was worse than the enemy. Men's fingers would turn black, toes would freeze solid inside boots, faces would blister and crack. Some men just stopped, sat down in the snow, couldn't move anymore, couldn't fight the cold. We'd try to get them up, get them moving, but sometimes they couldn't. Sometimes they'd just close their eyes, and that was it. The cold took them. We lost 4 men the first day, 2 to Chinese snipers, 2 to the cold. I wrote their names in my notebook, drew a line through their names on the roster, kept moving, because that's what you do. You keep moving or you die. By the 3rd day, we were down to 28 men. 28 out of 32. I'd already failed 4 families, 4 mothers who'd get telegrams saying their sons weren't coming home. But I had 28 left. 28 I could still save. I focused on that, on getting those 28 to safety. Then the truck broke down. We'd been lucky to have it. Most units were walking the entire way. But we'd found this old 6x truck abandoned at a supply depot. Got it running, used it to carry our wounded, carry supplies, to give men breaks from marching. That truck was saving lives, and then it died. Middle of nowhere, 20 miles from the next checkpoint. Chinese forces on all sides, and the engine just seized up, frozen, dead. Our mechanic, Corporal Henderson, spent 2 hours trying to fix it. Tried everything, but it was gone. Not repairable. Not with the tools we had, not in these temperatures. "It's done, sir," he said finally. His face was gray with exhaustion and cold. Engine block cracked from the cold. She's not moving again.
I looked at the truck, then at my men. 28 total, but 6 of them were in the back of that truck. 6 wounded who couldn't walk. Corporal Wu had taken shrapnel in his abdomen the day before. Field dressing was keeping him alive, but he couldn't move without screaming in pain. Private O'Brien's feet were black with frostbite. Both feet. He couldn't stand, let alone march. Private Santos had been shot through the chest, somehow still breathing, but barely. Private Cohen had passed out from hypothermia and wasn't waking up. Lance Corporal Reynolds had a back injury from a fall. Couldn't feel his legs. And Private Lee, 19 years old, had severe frostbite on all 4 limbs, hands and feet completely black. He was going to lose them all, even if we got him to a hospital. Which we wouldn't. Not for days. I did the math. Cold, brutal, terrible math. 22 men who could walk, who could fight, who could march 20 more miles to the checkpoint. And 6 who couldn't. If we tried to carry them, we'd move at maybe 1 mile per hour. Maybe. In this cold, through this terrain, with Chinese forces hunting us, they'd catch us in hours. All 28 would be captured, or worse. But if we left the 6, if we left them in the truck with supplies and weapons, the 22 could move fast, could make the checkpoint by tomorrow, could survive. 22 lives, or 28. 22 definitely saved, or all 28 probably lost. I had 5 minutes to decide. 5 minutes before we needed to move or risk getting caught right here.
My platoon sergeant, Mike Patterson, pulled me aside. 42 years old, 3 wars worth of experience. The best NCO I'd ever served with. "Sir," he said quietly, "we need to talk about the situation." "I know the situation, Sergeant. Those 6 men can't move, not without carrying them. And if we carry them, we all die." "I know." He looked at me, eyes hard, waiting. "What's the call, Lieutenant?" "What's the call?" That simple, that terrible, "What's the call?" I looked at the 6 men in the truck. Wu was conscious, watching me. He knew. They all knew. They knew what I was about to do. "How much morphine do we have?" I asked. Patterson checked. "Maybe 30 syrettes. Not enough for all 6 to... Not enough. Not enough to put them out of their pain permanently. Not enough to give them an easy end. Ammunition? We can leave them 2 rifles and about 300 rounds, some grenades." I nodded. Tried to think of another option. Any other option. But there wasn't one. The mathematics were absolute. "Give them everything we can spare," I said, voice hollow. "Morphine, ammunition, food, water. Make them as comfortable as possible. And then we move out. Fast. We make the checkpoint, we send help back." Patterson's face showed nothing. Just nodded. "Yes, sir." We both knew the truth. There would be no help to send back. No rescue mission. No one was coming back for 6 wounded Marines in the middle of enemy territory. But we couldn't say it. Couldn't admit it. Had to pretend. Had to tell the lie that made this bearable.
I climbed into the back of the truck. The 6 wounded men looked at me, waiting, hoping I'd found another way. Corporal Wu spoke first. "We're being left behind, aren't we, Lieutenant?" I wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him we'd all make it, that I'd found a solution. But I owed him the truth. "Yes," I said simply. Wu nodded. "Okay. That's okay." "It's not okay," Private Lee said, his voice shaking. "It's not fair. I'm 19. I don't want to die here." "You're not going to die," I lied. "We're leaving you supplies, weapons. We'll make the checkpoint and send help back. 2 days, maybe 3. You just have to hold on." 2 days, Wu repeated, not believing it, but accepting it, understanding that this was how it had to be. "Can you do that?" I asked. "Can you hold this position for 2 days?" Wu looked at the others. They were barely conscious, barely alive. But Wu nodded. "Yes, sir. We'll hold." "I'm sorry," I said, the words completely inadequate. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," Wu said. "You're saving 22. That's the right call. We all know it." "That doesn't make it easier." "No," Wu agreed. "It doesn't. But you're the lieutenant. You have to make the call. And you made it. Now you have to live with it." He was 23 years old, dying, and he was giving me permission, absolution, trying to make this easier for me. "Is there anything you want me to tell your families?" I asked. Wu thought for a moment. "Tell my fiancée I love her. Tell her I was thinking about her at the end. Tell her," his voice broke, "tell her I'm sorry I won't be there for the wedding." I wrote it down in my notebook. Asked each of them for messages. Messages I'd deliver if I survived, if I made it home, if I could live with what I was about to do. We left them everything we could. Morphine, ammunition, rations, water, blankets, 2 rifles, a grenade each. Made them as comfortable as possible in the back of that frozen truck. Then I stood there looking at them. 6 Marines,
6 men I'd promised to lead, to protect, to bring home. And I was leaving them to freeze, or be captured, or worse.
Sir, Patterson said quietly, "We need to move, now." I nodded, couldn't speak, turned away, climbed down from the truck. The other 22 Marines were waiting, watching, knowing what was happening. Some had tears freezing on their faces. Some looked angry. Some looked relieved that it wasn't them in that truck. All of them looked at me differently now, not as their lieutenant who'd keep them safe, as the officer who'd just abandoned 6 men to save the rest. "Listen up," I said, voice rough. "We're moving out. Fast march. We don't stop until we reach the checkpoint. Stay together, watch your intervals, keep moving no matter what. Understood?" "Yes, sir," they answered. Not loud, not enthusiastic, just acknowledging. "Move out." We started walking. 22 Marines, moving away from that truck, away from those 6 men, away from the promise I'd broken. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. If I looked back, I'd see their faces, see them watching us leave, see the truth of what I was doing. So I kept my eyes forward, kept walking, kept breathing even though every breath felt like betrayal. We'd gone maybe 100 yards when I heard it. A voice from the truck, Wu's voice, shouting, "Semper Fi, Lieutenant! Semper Fi!" The Marines' motto, always faithful, always loyal. The 6 men we were leaving behind were shouting it, reminding us, reminding me, that even though we were leaving them, they were still Marines, still faithful, still loyal, still brothers, even in the end. I didn't respond, couldn't respond, just kept walking. But every man in my platoon heard it, heard those 6 voices shouting Semper Fi as we walked away. That sound haunts me more than anything else, more than the cold, more than the fighting, more than any other decision I made in Korea. The sound of 6 Marines shouting Semper Fi as we walked away.
We marched for 18 hours straight, only stopped twice for 5-minute breaks, pushed through the exhaustion and the cold and the guilt, pushed through Chinese patrols, pushed through everything, because if we stopped, if we slowed down, then I'd left 6 men behind for nothing. Around midnight, we heard gunfire behind us, far behind us, where the truck would be. Rifle shots, then grenades, then silence. One of my men, Private Johnson, stopped, looked back. That was them, wasn't it, sir? That was Corporal Wu and the others. "Keep moving," I ordered. "Sir, shouldn't we?" "There's nothing we can do. Keep moving, that's an order." We kept moving, but we all knew. We all heard what that gunfire meant. The Chinese had found the truck, had found those 6 Marines, and there had been a fight. Whether they'd fought and died, or fought and been captured, we'd never know. But the gunfire meant the end, meant those 6 men were gone, meant my decision had become permanent, final. We reached the checkpoint at dawn. 22 Marines, all of us frostbitten, all of us exhausted, all of us traumatized, but alive. The checkpoint commander saw us coming, counted heads. "Lieutenant Carson, where's the rest of your platoon?" "This is it," I said. 22 men. "You started with 32. I'm aware." I filed my report, wrote down the names of the 10 men I'd lost. 4 to combat and cold. 6 left behind by order of the commanding officer, by order of me. I wrote the reasons, explained the tactical situation, broken truck, the impossible choice. Made it sound professional, detached, like a military decision instead of a moral failure. The report was approved, marked as acceptable under the circumstances. Command said I'd made the right call, saved 22 lives. That's what mattered. Saved the most men possible. But when I closed my eyes that night, I didn't see the 22 who lived. I saw the 6 who didn't. Saw Wu shouting Semper Fi. Saw Lee crying because he was 19 and didn't want to die. Saw all of them watching me walk away, leaving them, abandoning them, breaking the sacred rule. I'd saved 22 lives that day and lost a piece of my soul I'd never get back.
The Battle of Chosin Reservoir lasted 17 days total. The 1st Marine Division fought its way south to the evacuation point at Hungnam. 78 miles of frozen hell, fighting the entire way. We'd gone into Chosin with about 15,000 Marines. We came out with about 12,000 combat effective. The rest were casualties, wounded, missing, gone. My platoon made it to Hungnam with 17 men. Lost 5 more during the remaining 2 weeks of fighting. 5 more names in my notebook. 5 more families who'd get bad news. Out of 32 men I'd started with, 17 survived. 15 didn't. 6 of them because I made a choice. We evacuated from Hungnam in December. Loaded onto Navy ships, sailed away from Korea, left it all behind. The frozen mountains, the Chinese army, the brothers we'd lost. I stood on the deck of that ship watching Korea disappear over the horizon, feeling nothing, just empty. Patterson stood beside me. "You did good, sir," he said. "Brought most of them out. That's more than a lot of officers can say." I left 6 men behind, Sergeant. You saved 22. Some of those 22 have wives, kids, families waiting for them. They're going home because you made the hard call. Doesn't feel like I did good. It never does, Patterson said quietly. That's how you know it was the right decision. The easy decisions don't haunt you. The impossible ones do. He was right, but being right didn't make the weight lighter. We shipped back to the States in January 1951. I was sent to Camp Pendleton, promoted to captain, given a new command, awarded a Silver Star for actions at Chosin. The citation said I displayed exceptional leadership under extreme conditions, made tactical decisions that saved numerous lives, that I'd exemplified the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. I kept the medal in a drawer, never wore it, never looked at it, because every time I did, I saw 6 faces, heard 6 voices shouting Semper Fi as I walked away. I stayed in the Marines for another 20 years, served in Vietnam, rose to lieutenant colonel, commanded a battalion, made more impossible choices, lost more men. But nothing ever compared to Chosin. Nothing ever hurt like leaving those 6 Marines in that frozen truck. I retired in 1970, moved back to Pittsburgh, not to the mills. I'd escaped that life. Instead, I taught history at a community college, tried to give back somehow, tried to help young people understand what war really cost. I got married in 1972, had 2 kids, built a life. My wife knew I'd served in Korea, knew I'd been at Chosin, but I never told her the details. Never told her about the truck, about the choice, about the 6 men. How could I? How could I explain that to someone who hadn't been there? She'd try to understand, would say I'd done what I had to do, would tell me it wasn't my fault. But it was my fault. I was the lieutenant. The decision was mine. The weight was mine. The guilt was mine.
For 40 years, I carried it alone. Never talked about it, never shared it. Just carried the weight, whispered the names. Wu, O'Brien, Santos, Cohen, Reynolds, Lee. Said them like a prayer every night before sleep, making sure I never forgot, never let them disappear. Then in 1995, I got a phone call. A researcher working on a book about Chosin. He'd found records, wanted to interview me, asked me about my platoon, about the march, about the casualties. I told him the official story, what was in the reports, but he kept pushing, kept asking. Finally asked specifically about November 30th, 1950, about 6 Marines left behind. How did you know about that? I asked. Found a Chinese military report, captured after the war, translated just recently. Mentions finding 6 wounded American Marines in an abandoned vehicle. November 30th, lists their names from their dog tags. Wu, O'Brien, Santos, Cohen, Reynolds, Lee. My heart stopped. What did the report say? What happened to them? There was a pause. Sir, are you sure you want to know? Tell me.
According to the Chinese report, they found the truck around 2100 hours. The Marines inside opened fire. One Chinese soldier was struck before they suppressed the position. All 6 Marines were captured alive. Alive. The word hit me like a bullet. Alive? Yes, sir. They were taken prisoner, moved to a POW camp near the Yalu River. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All these years I'd assumed they'd been lost, that they'd fought and fell, that leaving them behind had been a mercy because they'd passed quickly from cold or combat. But they'd been captured, had survived, had been taken prisoner. What happened to them? Did they make it home? Another pause, longer this time. No, sir. Records show all 6 perished in captivity. The camp had a 90% mortality rate that winter. No heat, minimal food, no medical care. They didn't last long. Perished. That soft word for died suffering, for died slowly, for died in agony far from home. How long? My voice barely a whisper. Sir? How long did they survive after we left them? The records aren't specific, but probably a few weeks, maybe a month. A month. Wu had survived a month in a Chinese prison camp with a gut wound. O'Brien had lasted a month on frozen feet he couldn't walk on. Santos had lived a month with a chest wound and no medical care. All of them had lived long enough to know we weren't coming back, that there would be no rescue, that we'd left them for real. There's one more thing, the researcher said. The Chinese report includes something one of the prisoners said, Corporal Wu, before he passed. What did he say? According to the translator's notes, he kept repeating 2 words, Semper Fi, over and over, even at the end. Semper Fi. I hung up the phone, sat there in my study, tears running down my face. Because I thought leaving them had been the end. Thought they'd gone quickly, cold or combat, relatively fast. But they lived, had suffered, and died slowly in a prison camp. Had stayed faithful even at the end. Semper Fi, always faithful, even when I'd left them, even when they'd known I wasn't coming back. They'd stayed faithful, and I had abandoned them. I tried to find the other survivors from my platoon, the 17 who'd made it home. Most were gone by 1995. Age, disease, time. But I found 3, called them, told them what I'd learned.
that the 6 hadn't passed immediately, that they'd been captured and suffered. One of them, Corporal Martinez, broke down crying. "I thought it was fast," he said. "Thought the cold took them quick. But they were alive. Jesus, Lieutenant, they were alive." "I know. We left them alive, left them to suffer." "I left them," I corrected. "I gave the order. This is on me." "No," Martinez said. "We all walked away. We're all responsible. We all have to carry it." He was right. But being the one who gave the order made the weight different, made it heavier, made it personal. I contacted the families, the ones I could find. Told them what I'd learned. Told them their sons had been captured, had survived for a while, had died in a prison camp. Some wanted details, wanted to know everything. Some didn't want to know anything, preferred the original story, preferred to think it had been fast. I understood both reactions. Sometimes the truth helps. Sometimes it makes things worse. Corporal Wu's fiancée had never married. Still waiting for him 70 years later. When I called her, she was 92 years old, living in San Francisco, alone. "I always knew he didn't come home," she said. "But I never gave up hope that somehow, that maybe." "I'm sorry," I told her. "I'm so sorry. I should have found another way. I should have—" "You did what you had to do," she interrupted. "Jimmy knew that. In his last letter, he told me that if anything happened, not to blame anyone, that war makes people choose terrible things." That's what he said. Terrible things. He was right. But you're still carrying it, aren't you? Still blaming yourself? Every day. Every single day for 75 years. He wouldn't want that, she said softly. Jimmy believed in doing your duty, in making hard choices. He'd understand. He did understand. That's why he shouted Semper Fi, to let you know he understood. How do you know about that? You're not the first person from that day to call me Lieutenant. Over the years, 3 other men from your platoon reached out. They all mentioned it, how the 6 men shouted Semper Fi as you marched away, how it haunted them. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond. They forgave you, she continued, all of them. Even at the end, they stayed faithful to you, to the Corps, to each other. The question is, when will you forgive yourself? I'm 104 years old now. 75 years since Chosin, since that frozen truck, since the choice I made. Wu's fiancé was right. The 6 men forgave me, understood why I did what I did, stayed faithful even at the end. But I've never forgiven myself. Never will. Because forgiveness would mean accepting that what I did was okay, that leaving 6 Marines to be captured and suffer and die in a prison camp was acceptable because it saved 22 others. And I can't accept that. Can't reduce human lives to mathematics. Can't turn brotherhood into tactical calculations. Can't believe that some lives are worth more than others just because they can walk and fight and survive. I made the choice. the tactically correct choice, the choice that saved the most lives, the choice any officer would have made in the same situation. And I've hated myself for it ever since. People ask me about Korea, about Chosin, about being one of the chosen few who survived that hell. They want hero stories, want to hear about courage and brotherhood, want to know what it was like. I tell them the truth, that it was cold, that we suffered, that we lost good men. But I don't tell them about the truck, about the 6 faces, about the choice. Because how do you explain that? How do you tell someone that Marines do leave their own behind, that sometimes Semper Fi isn't enough, that sometimes survival requires abandonment? You can't. So I keep it to myself, carry the weight alone, the way I've carried it for 75 years. Here's what I learned at Chosin. Command isn't about being brave. It's not about being strong or smart or tactical. Command is about making choices that destroy you, about sacrificing pieces of your soul so your men can keep theirs, about carrying weight so heavy that it bends your entire life around it.
I saved 22 lives that day in November 1950. 22 Marines who went home to their families, who had children, who lived full lives, because 6 others didn't. Because 6 others were left behind, captured, suffered, passed in a frozen prison camp far from home. The mathematics were simple. 22 over 6. 22 lives saved versus 6 lives lost. Any commander would make the same choice. Any tactician would approve the decision. It was correct, proper, justified. And it's the worst thing I've ever done. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right. Because saving those 22 required abandoning 6. Because the only way to be a good commander was to do something unforgivable. That's the burden of leadership. Not that you make mistakes, but that you make correct decisions that cost pieces of your humanity. That you do the right thing and it feels exactly like doing the worst thing. That you save lives and lose your soul in the process. I left 6 men behind because I had to. Had to decide between 22 lives and 6. Had to do the mathematics of survival. Had to be the commander instead of the brother. And I made the right choice. The only choice. The terrible, necessary, unforgivable choice. Wu, O'Brien, Santos, Cohen, Reynolds, Lee. I whisper their names every night. Have whispered them for 75 years. Will whisper them for however many days I have left. Making sure they're not forgotten. Making sure someone remembers that they were left behind, that they suffered, that they stayed faithful even when I failed them. Semper Fi, they shouted as I walked away, as I left them, as I broke the sacred rule. Always faithful, even at the end, even when their lieutenant chose 22 over 6, even when I left them behind, they stayed faithful. I've tried to do the same, tried to stay faithful to their memory, to carry the weight, to never forget, to never forgive myself. Because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to carry the guilt. Someone needs to acknowledge that we broke the rule, that Marines do leave their own behind,
when there's no other choice, when the mathematics demand it, when command requires it.
The 17 men who survived from my original 32 are all gone now. Last one passed away 3 years ago. It's just me now. Me and the weight. Me and the memories. Me and the 6 faces I still see every night. Sometimes people thank me for my service. Say I'm a hero. Say I did my duty. I nod, say thank you, accept their gratitude. But I'm not a hero. Heroes don't leave men behind. Heroes don't choose who lives and who dies based on mathematics. Heroes save everyone. I saved who I could, left who I had to, made the terrible choice. And I paid for it every day since. That's not heroism. That's survival. And survival, I've learned, is sometimes the cruelest thing of all. Because the ones who don't survive, they don't have to carry the weight, don't have to remember, don't have to live with the choices. We do. The survivors, the ones who made it home. We carry them, all of them. The ones who fought and fell, the ones we left behind, the ones who stayed faithful even at the end. We carry their names, their faces, their last words, their sacrifices. We carry all of it, forever, until we finally join them, until we finally face them again, until we finally have to answer for the choices we made. I left 6 men behind because I had to choose. That's the truth. Simple, terrible, complete. I had to choose, and I chose survival over brotherhood, chose tactics over loyalty, chose 22 over 6. And I've spent 75 years wondering if I chose wrong, knowing I chose right, unable to reconcile the difference. That's leadership. That's command. That's what they don't tell you when they pin on the bars. That sometimes being a good officer means being a terrible person. That sometimes doing your duty means breaking your promises. That sometimes saving lives means abandoning others and living with that forever. Wu, O'Brien, Santos, Cohen, Reynolds, Lee. Semper Fi, always faithful, even when I wasn't.